Hey, it's Chris from retrocession.org. This is Step into Bliss, episode 15. Thanks for joining me. I say it every episode. I say Chris from retrocession.org. But I really haven't talked about retrocession. And that's kind of silly. So I'm going to talk about retrocession today. I've told bits of my story. I've hinted at it. I've talked about it tangentially, but I haven't really talked about retrocession. So to start, I'm going to be repeating myself, some things I've already said in past episodes, but my life was a mess. If you want the full story, you can pick up the free ebook, on my website, retrocession.org. Just provide your email. You'll be able to download a copy right away, hear more of my story, but suffice it to say, I suffered from really severe anxiety from about 6 or 7 until about 3.5 years ago. And it was increasingly bad anxiety, and the panic attacks became daily at a certain point near the end there. It became unmanageable. Life was unmanageable at the deepest levels. I really didn't think I would live beyond 50 years old. I'm 46 now. And certainly hope to live much longer than that. But I didn't see any way I would survive. I struggled. And then, in that desperation, kind of the product of 25 years of exploring through meditation, various religions, spiritual processes, I discovered a method for finding the origin of my pain. So what do I mean by that? So, in particular, in one occasion, this is really the beginning of the process for me, I was sitting on the couch, and I felt this crushing weight of anxiety, of I think a panic attack starting up, and it felt like a weight on my chest. And this method I had developed allowed me to go back to the origin of that anxiety. So I found an incident from my childhood, from about 6 or 7 years old. And I'm not going to go into that this time, maybe at some point in the future, but I found it. It made a lot of sense. Well, at first, my thought was, you know what? I take it back. I'm going to tell the story to some extent. I'm going to reverse it. I'm not going to edit this either. I'm just going to leave it because I really was hesitant to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. And I think I was hesitant because it involves religion. I constantly find myself censoring when it comes to religion and spirituality because I know how deeply people feel about it. And I'm not ever, including today, going to condemn anybody's beliefs. I'm never going to tell anybody what they should believe. But even just that fact that I said that could trigger some people, and I know that. The fact that I'm saying I'm not going to tell you what to believe. Because so many of us want to do that. But that's not the topic here. Maybe one day I'll do that podcast, though frankly I'm really hesitant to do it because I think it's going to, well, some people will agree, I think it's going to cause some upset with others. So funny enough, well, it's not very funny. Since this time, since remembering this kind of core wound, I recalled some things that were on the surface much worse than this. And I think this is why this thing was able to remain buried for so long. And this is the power of retrocession. There are methods that work to help alleviate some of this, the pain from the past, the trauma from the past. EMDR. I went through an EMDR session early in my healing, before retrocession, or right at the beginning of retrocession. And it worked, but what EMDR did not have was a method for reliably finding the core wound or finding the things that are really bothering us. And from talking to people that have done more EMDR than me, it doesn't have a reliable method for doing that. So people kind of go on whim and they decide what they're going to work on. Well, this is a method for finding the thing that's actually bothering us. The point of saying all that is it's usually surprising. And I say that because so many people have suffered such horrible, horrible things like sexual trauma, death around them, war. And it was, I think, easy for me to say, well, I didn't experience any of those things. I'm fine. And whatever it says about me, apparently this incident was deeply, deeply troubling for my 6 or 7-year-old self. So what is it? I know, long lead up to that. It all came down to a sermon in church. So we were Episcopal until I was about 6, became a very, very fundamentalist version of Baptist. I think the most fundamentalist type you can be, GARBC. And I don't remember how early at that church, but there was a sermon about hell. Well, I don't know if the sermon was about hell, but there was an illustration given. It was a story, basically a fictional story to illustrate a point. And that story is about a man who lived a good life, generally a good person, but then he dies and finds himself in hell. And he can't believe it. But I was a good person. Why am I in hell? As you would expect someone to be. And then he's starts to reach down into the flames of hell. So remember, 6 or 7 years old, the thought of being burned on a stove just momentarily would be terrifying. It was terrifying. This is eternal burning and damnation. So difficult difficult for a child to conceptualize in any healthy way, apparently, for me especially. But we came from a background where we didn't talk about those things. That wasn't really a consideration. I'd never heard of hell before. And now I'm hearing about how this dead guy is in hell burning, and he's reaching down into the flames, and he pulls out, I think, his mother, and he says, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he puts her back into the flames, and then he pulls out his priest. "Why didn't you tell me?" And it goes through this series of 5 or 6 people. "Why didn't you tell me?" The point being, you need to be born again in a Protestant way. And that twisted my consciousness. It shattered my perception of the world. So as a child, afraid of pain, the thought that this all-powerful being was going to potentially burn me for eternity, despite having created me and being all-knowing, knowing that I would not do this thing that I had to do, created me to suffer for eternity. It shattered my consciousness. And I didn't know this. I mean, I kind of suspected it. I think I said in another podcast, first therapist I went to for test anxiety, and she diagnosed me as having religious trauma, which made sense. I got it. I remembered all this. It's not like it was hidden in my memory, but I thought I got over it. I thought that I got over it all. But this was the core wound. And I can tell you that with certainty because, number one, it was my consciousness. It was coming from me. And this is why this shouldn't be threatening to anybody. I'm telling you what happened in me. And here's the proof that I have. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks because I have the proof in my body and mind. Undeniable proof that this was my core wound. After clearing this up, finding the incident, and then eventually, and I'm jumping ahead, but after clearing it up, the bigger part of my anxiety was gone. The panic attacks stopped. Never had another one after that date. So that's probably, I don't know how many years now, but this is the very beginning of the process. When that was cleared up, when that was handled, never had another panic attack, never even got close. There were times when I would wait for a panic attack to come up and I would be looking internally, just kind of observing my mental state, and it never came up. And it was always shocking. Like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So that core wound was there. And I found it using part of what I now call retrocession. And it was life-changing. Now, I still had severe anxiety after clearing this up, but no panic attacks. And the anxiety was, I guess it was not severe. It was far less severe than it had been. And life was a lot more manageable. And so using retrocession, I started to clear up all this stuff. So I would be, let's just say I'm driving in the car and some anxiety drops and I feel it in a particular way. Now, I know it seems like anxiety is anxiety, but what I discovered, at least in myself, and maybe it's not the same for everybody, but what I discovered in myself is not all anxiety is the same. It has a different sensation in my body. I feel it in different ways. And so one session of retrocession or some other method, it didn't clear it all up, but it cleared up one particular species of anxiety. So I got lucky. I got to the core wound first. I don't know why that is. I'm grateful for it. I thank God for that every day, that I found the core wound first. That was maybe not essential to my journey, but it was a powerful experience because it gave me the space to do what I started doing, which is clearing up all of the stuff. So anytime a memory came back, a bad memory from the past, and it didn't have to be childhood, it could be day ago, and I would clear the lingering effects from it. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that I pushed it away and compartmentalized it. That's not it at all. Fully re-experienced it and then released it, integrated that experience into my memory. So what was something that triggered me is now just a memory. It's not that I forget these events in my life, but they no longer affect me today. And so because I got that core wound right away and I saw the power of this process of finding these events that lead to the suffering of today and being who I am, I pursued everything. It was almost obsessive. I pursued it, applying retrocession to myself every single day, sometimes waking and before I opened my eyes, feeling the sense of dread. Oh, I got to go to work. And I would ask myself, where is this coming from? And I would use the process to go back and find the origin of this pain that wanted me to stay in bed in the morning. And don't get me wrong, sometimes we just don't want to get up and go to work. That's not what I'm talking about. That's normal. We're not erasing emotions. We're not pushing emotions away. We can fully experience the emotions and then make a choice. That is the point of it. Real healing gives us freedom. And that's what retrocession was doing for me. So over the course of time, things got better and better and better and better. And eventually the anxiety was gone. Now I know, I'm not looking it up now, but there's some definition of anxiety. Everyone experiences it. It's a normal human emotion. I'm not saying anxiety free in the sense of the way psychology refers to anxiety. I'm saying the suffering resulting from anxiety. I'm saying the anxiety that feels unbearable, unmanageable. Not the anxiety of, oh, I have a project due tomorrow, so I'm going to work really hard on it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the suffering. So that got cleared up. Amazing. I can't tell you how many times I stood in my shower, and I don't know why it always happened in the shower in the morning, but I would stand in the shower and I would look internally. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay, but I would just assess. Let's just say I would sit with myself and I would feel the feelings I was feeling, my state of being. Almost, sometimes I think of it as like the flavor of consciousness. Where am I right now? And I would feel that freedom. No anxiety. Just freedom. It feels like spaciousness, where everything felt confined and pulled in deep into my chest, like a hard knot in the past. Now it was spaciousness, like standing in the middle of an open field in the beautiful sunshine, beautiful clouds overhead, absolute freedom. I can head in any direction, no constraints. That's what it felt like. So I would cry in the shower almost every day for a period. I would cry when I felt that freedom in my heart. It's bringing up tears now because I was broken beyond belief. So the anxiety's gone. And I still, at times, I guess the two main struggles I had were depression and procrastination. And there are other struggles as well, but those were the big ones, depression being the main one that I wanted to deal with. I had ways around the procrastination I could kind of deal with. And I mean, I didn't deal with it all that successfully, but I could live with it. The depression, while not as troubling to me as the anxiety was still something that was bothering me. And I did work. I did retrocession. I found some incidents, worked on it. But funny enough, the procrastination turned out to be the key to the depression. So I've done all this work, cleared up the anxiety, and I was working at home at the time. This is, I've worked at home most of my career, but I was working at home. So this must be 2020, early in 2020. And I'm struggling to get any work done. It literally felt like, and I don't mean this as a metaphor, it literally felt like there was plexiglass in between me and my computer. And I couldn't lift my hands to put them on the keyboard. I mean, maybe in some sense I could have, but it was that frozen feeling. This was extreme procrastination. So extreme it felt physiological. I'm sitting there and I had only really applied retrocession to anxiety, and I think at that time somewhat to depression, though it was I saw it primarily as a tool for anxiety, for dealing with anxiety. But I said to myself, well, what if I apply it to the procrastination? And so I'll get a little bit more into this in a while. I'm just telling the story now. But there are basically two main phases to retrocession. First, we locate the root of what it is we're experiencing. Sometimes we will remember a particular event from childhood, but I actually think that's not the most effective way to do it. But we'll get into that in a minute. So we locate the event, and then we clear the emotional effects from that event, so it no longer affects us to this day. So I thought, why not apply this to procrastination? It worked with anxiety. Let's try it with procrastination. So I first located what seemed to be an event that precipitated all this procrastination, and then I cleared it with the second phase. It's called sweeping integration, but I cleared it, integrated that experience into my life. And you know what? It worked. And I say this with glee because I spent 40-some years procrastinating. Well, maybe not 40-some. I probably didn't procrastinate at 4. But for most of my life, I had been notorious about procrastination, and it was bad. At times, it was so bad that it caused massive problems in my life. And for the first time, and ever since then, I've not struggled with procrastination. But that's actually not the point here. That was amazing. That is a miraculous result. But the funny thing was, it was also the last time I experienced depression. And I don't remember what the event was that I cleared in that instance. A lot of times when you clear something, it just fades into your memory, and it can be hard to remember. So I do tell people, if they want to remember something, you want to journal immediately before and after your session, because it is easy to forget what happened because there's no longer emotional charge associated with it. It's just a memory, just like, I don't know, eating ice cream with your grandmother at 5. It's a memory. It's not a life-changing, world-altering event anymore. And so it's easy to have that fade into the background. But the depression went away. So I kind of wish I knew what that event was, but not only did it clear the procrastination, it cleared up the depression. And I never figured out why or how, and I didn't care. All that mattered to me was it worked. And that was kind of the end of it for me. I've cleared, every once in a while I find something, there's some reaction that comes out of me, and I say, wait a minute, that is a reaction that is felt triggered there. What's the origin of this? And then I'll go back, find it, and clear it. But clearing the procrastination, clearing the depression, that was really the beginning of the end for me that was the end of the end for me of the big problems that I was having. Now it was time to live life, and life has been incredible since then. So what is that, like 3.5 years ago, roughly, that that this all went down. And life has been incredible. Everything has changed. I'll just say one thing, and this is a whole nother podcast, but I'll say one thing. The unexpected result after all that healing was that it didn't make me Superman. It didn't make me highly capable and able to do everything I'd ever wanted to do. It took away the barriers to it. But what I discovered was I had lived my whole life, or most of my life, making decisions based on how it affects my anxiety. Now the anxiety's gone. Or I made some decisions based on procrastination, my propensity for procrastination. I made decisions based on the depression I was feeling. Now all that was gone. And I didn't know how to make decisions. Now, I didn't feel stuck and unhappy, and I wasn't suffering as a result of this, but I recognized, oh my gosh, I don't know how to decide anymore. And I can choose randomly, or I can be reasonable about it, but it was taking longer to make decisions because I had to think about every decision. And it was kind of shocking, like, oh my gosh, I've always been so decisive. I mean, it's easy to figure out what anxiety tells me to do. I just listen internally. Oh, anxiety says to do this. I'm going to do that. Well, now I had to actually decide for myself. Now I make it sound like it's a bad thing. It was never a bad thing. It never felt like a bad thing. It was phenomenal. But when the healing comes, and I believe it's available for all of you, everyone out there, when the healing comes, there can be some interesting side effects. And this is one of them. Not knowing how to make decisions as an adult, being in an adult body. In a lot of ways, I felt like I was 6 again or 7 again right before that core wound happened. Everything before the core wound was smooth sailing. I never felt any difficulty in my life. I never suffered until that core wound, or right about there. And so I felt like I was back there, but when you have a 7-year-old's, I don't want to say mind, but a 7-year-old's emotional maturity, or maybe that's not right, but a 7-year-old's decision-making skills, you better learn pretty quickly. Fortunately, I have some education and some experience, and I can build off of that. And I was able to pretty quickly figure out how I wanted to live my life, but it took a little while. And so there was still some upheaval in my life, and still didn't know how to make decisions, and I'm still learning. But you know what? I'd rather make mistakes because I don't know what I'm doing than make mistakes because anxiety told me to do something horribly irrational and destructive to my life. So definitely progress. And I'm definitely not perfect. I want to make sure that's clear as well. When I say I'm healed, I'm not suffering from anxiety anymore, and I'm not suffering from depression, and I'm not suffering from procrastination. I'm not perfect. I got to make that clear, but I am healed of that suffering. It is not happening anymore. I feel normal emotions, and then they fade, and I move on about my day. I don't feel emotions get triggered and then go off the rest of the day worrying about what somebody said to me or what I said, or thinking about how horrible this person, or that just doesn't happen anymore. When I say triggered, I guess I'll explain that now. What I mean is an emotion arises, and then according to research, and I don't have the reference in front of me, but you can always get the ebook. The ebook does have a link to the study, but a psychologist, I believe it was, discovered that our emotions have about a 90 seconds life cycle. And I'm interpreting now. But everything that happens after that 90 seconds, it's triggered. We're triggered. Now, that doesn't mean emotions come and then go and they never come back. I don't mean that. I mean, grieving can take years. But the feeling of an emotion comes up and then it goes away. And even if the 90 seconds is wrong, even if it's 2 hours, anything beyond that initial emotion that causes our thoughts to go in a particular direction, repetitive thoughts, compulsions, anything that causes us to behave in a particular way after the initial emotion, that's something that's been triggered. In my experience, in my life, all of those triggers were related to past events in my life. All of them, every single one of them, no exceptions.
So imagine that. You don't have to be triggered anymore. You get to choose. You feel emotions fully, and then you get to choose how you're going to respond. You get to choose. You're not having your thoughts, your impulses. You're not having any of that dictated by the emotions that arise. You get to choose. And that's what retrocession did for me. So that's the origin of retrocession. Let's talk about the process now. So I talked about how it has two main phases. We have a locating phase and then sweeping integration, where we clear up the effects of that past incident that we've located. But it's a little bit more involved than that. For most people, our sessions start with deep relaxation. Surprisingly, well, it was surprising for me, it's actually not an essential step in the process for some people. Now, and some people, when we first start doing retrocession, they need the initial relaxation, and then eventually they no longer need it. And that's why I don't say it's one of the steps of retrocession for the most part. We do it for everybody in the beginning, but many people no longer need the relaxation. The stages in retrocession are something that can be learned. And you, with practice, can become quite good at locating and quite good at sweeping. Sweeping is, you can get more proficient at it, but depending on how deep something is, it can be an involved process, and you can't really shortcut it so much. But locating can be quick. It can be fast. Once you learn how to locate incidents in your past, it can be as quick as a split second. I can give the prompt and then you just know where you are. But the process. So often it starts with deep relaxation most of the time. And then from that deeply relaxed state, we locate the origin, the event that started this chain that brought us to where we are now with this thing that's causing us suffering. So usually anxiety, could be depression, something else. Now we found it, and then we use this process that I call sweeping integration to clear it up. The important thing to note about sweeping integration and really retrocession as a whole is that it is not magic. It is not mystical. I mean, depending how you define mystical. I'm saying it's not mystical. Nobody's reciting some incantation over you. And because of that, it requires you, the one who's being healed, to be willing to confront the past. Now, not everyone in retrocession relives fully their experience, but plenty do. So you have to be willing to confront the past, whatever it is, no matter how horrible it is. You have to be willing to confront it. And to be upfront, not everyone, a large minority of people that I work with, they have some stuff in their past that's hidden, they were not aware of. And how does this usually manifest? So if you're listening to this and you're interested in healing, this may apply to you. Are there any periods in your past, if you think back, if you kind of rewind your memory, are there any periods in your past that seem kind of fuzzy, or maybe you have no memories from a particular period of your life? Maybe it seems like a black box in the past. I'm just making this up, between 8 and 10, or 10 and 14, or 7 and 14, or maybe birth to 14, or birth to 8. Doesn't matter. But a period of time where you really don't remember anything, or the memories are real fuzzy. That is often an indicator, in my experience, of something buried. Something that you are protecting yourself from. And it is not easy to get to that stuff. It can be a challenging process. It can be a multi-session process just to get to one of those. And so what we'll often do is we will find that period of time. And so what I often like to do is I like to kind of rewind, find where that period ends, and then also go back before that period, unless it began, there's no memories from birth on until a certain age. Well, then we don't go before it. But if it's a discrete period of time, we will find the edges of that period of time. And then very, very gently start to encroach little by little. We're not jumping right into the middle of that period of time. It really probably would not work. But we're going to slowly encroach on that period. And when someone is ready, they will go there. But not until they're ready. So that if you grew up in church, you probably heard God doesn't give us anything that we can't handle. And I think there's some secular versions of that. But I believe with retrocession that you will not be given anything that you cannot handle. And that takes us to another point. And I'm not interested in explaining why these things work. I'm interested in whether these things work. And so I may have some theories about how and why retrocession works, but that's not my purpose here. I'm not here to tell you why it's working. I'm just interested in that it works. And something I've discovered with myself, with other people, is that all of us have this part of our mind, and I think it's subconscious because of the way we access it, but there's a part of us that knows where to go and knows what to do. And so I always say this in seminars, and I always say this when I'm working individually with someone. There's only one thing that's required for retrocession. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to know anything about it. The one thing, you don't have to do anything except trust. Not me. You can be skeptical of me. Trust yourself. You know where to go. You know how to get there. Now, it's very helpful to have someone guiding, somebody giving you prompts to get you there, but you know where to go. You know which incident to go to. It always works. For those for whom retrocession works, they can go back to any incident that they need to go to. So your subconscious mind, we're going to call it that. Not saying there is not a subconscious mind. Not interested in theorizing about that, but you know what I mean. Not the conscious part, the thinking part, but the part that operates in the background. It knows where to go when it's ready. And so kind of a corollary to God won't give you anything you can't handle. I'm going to tell you this part of you, your subconscious mind, will not give you anything you cannot handle. And that's the beautiful thing. You can trust yourself. And maybe you eventually trust me that I'm just there to give you light guidance, to get you where you need to go, and that you are the one doing the work. And so you're going to know where to go. You're going to know how quickly to go there. And this is why one-on-one sessions are so valuable, because I'm able to observe, listen. I can see physical signs when somebody is in the place they need to be, so I can offer some assistance and say, wait a minute, what did you just pass by? It happens often. I see this one particular physical sign that I'm not going to say because I don't want to pre-cue somebody that's going to come do retrocession, but everybody does it. And I can tell if somebody has had a memory pop up that they've pushed away. Couldn't be that. It happens all the time. It happened with me so many times when I was doing retrocession on myself. My mind is like, no, couldn't be that. Let's move on. That is usually a good sign that you're in exactly the right place. So I can watch for those signals and signs and then guide someone there, but it is always the person receiving retrocession that is doing the bulk of the work. And I guess that's a big point that I'm making here is you're not going to heal, in my opinion, you're not going to heal unless you're willing to do the work, and you're not going to heal unless you're willing to confront the events in your life that led to the suffering you're experiencing now. I know some people are going to tell you that you can go get healing by doing nothing, just laying there. You can get healing by reciting some prayer. You can get healing by doing nothing whatsoever. I've never seen it. Maybe I'm wrong. I absolutely would love to be proven wrong. I really would. But in my experience, seeing real healing, and if you want to know what I mean by real healing, one of my most recent podcasts is about that. Real healing is permanent. and it has all pervasive effects throughout your life. So if you're just feeling good for a little while and then feeling bad again and feeling good and bad and good and bad and over again, and there's no general upward trajectory, I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's healing. That's symptom relief, which is great. We need symptom relief to get by sometimes, especially when things are really tough. But real healing has an upward trajectory, a trajectory toward wholeness, a trajectory toward peace, getting triggered less. So you have within you the tools that you need to heal. And I have some techniques that can help people get there. When it comes to sweeping integration, the part where we clear it up, that can take a while. Even if you have a lot of experience, it does get easier. And if you're dealing with real minor incidents, it can get real quick. So I guess there is some experience that comes into sweeping integration, but the locating experience, man, it'll get you there so fast in most cases, unless it's some deep hidden thing, and then it can still take a while. But with sweeping integration, at first it can take a pretty long time, especially if we're going after a core wound. But then eventually, when you notice these little things coming up, these little bits of, and I haven't talked about it in this podcast, but programming, because this isn't just about trauma, this isn't just about bad events, but this is about situations where we really don't have a choice and we have a little program running in our mind that tells us what to do. We can clear that with retrocession as well. But when we're clearing little bits of programming, sweeping integration can literally take 10 seconds. The deeper stuff, the more painful stuff often takes longer than that. But you have to be willing to confront it. You have to be willing to do the work. It's not easy. So that's the general process of a retrocession session, but there's also a process that I follow strictly now. In the past, I was pretty loose with process. In the beginning, when I was working with just friends, people I was really close to, good friends, they were willing to let me experiment with them. I'm so grateful to them. I'll always be grateful to them. It's an amazing opportunity to work with them. And in the beginning, my first method was we go after the core wound immediately. First session, go after it. And that may still be something that I do with people sometimes, but as I've had some strangers that come to me that we do that and it works and we clear it up immediately. But I've also learned that there are people that are not ready for that. There are people who are whose minds are too noisy to get there. Their thoughts won't stop. Their racing thoughts, they stop them from getting where they need to go. So there is a little bit more of a process to retrocession than there was in the past. So first thing someone does is they find me through the website, through this podcast, through YouTube, the ebook. And if they decide they want to hear more about retrocession directly from me, they'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. And that's done through the website. It's right there on retrocession.org, right at the top. I think there's two buttons right in the bottom part of the main image on the site. There's a free ebook and then a schedule a discovery call link, I believe. I would have to go look at it to tell you. I work on the site all the time. But anyway, you can go to the site, get that discovery call, get that ebook. It's kind of hilarious. I didn't know what was on the website, but I went and looked. I paused for a second. So there's a link to the free ebook, and then there's a button that says find out about one-to-one sessions. If you go to the find out about one-to-one sessions link, that's going to take you to the link for the 15-minute discovery call. Now, I set the site up like that because I really would like everyone to read that ebook before we even do the call, because I want to make sure that the people I'm talking to understand what retrocession is, how it changed my life, and also what the process generally looks like. So the ebook goes through a lot of what I'm talking about here and goes in actually a little bit more detail than I do here. It's very different than what I'm talking about here in a sense. So it's definitely worth listening here and also reading the ebook. So I would encourage anyone that's potentially interested or just curious about retrocession, get the free ebook. Read it. There's exercises in it. Those exercises are going to be valuable no matter what you do. If you never do retrocession, the exercises in the book, there's written work, journaling essentially. There's memory work, which is one of my favorite pieces of it. So that's where we're locating memories. Now, they're usually going to be positive ones when you do memory work by yourself. You can choose to go after tough stuff, but I'm encouraging people in the book to go after the easier stuff, positive memories. There's relaxation work. There are videos, there's videos that are linked in the book so that you don't have to read the exercise and then try to implement it. So relaxation, you click the link in the book, it takes you to relaxation. But anyway, my hope is everyone reads the book, then schedules a 15-minute discovery call. Discovery call is free. I do not want to make this my job in the sense that I need people to pay me to continue doing this. Now, I do charge, but it is sliding scale. When I say sliding scale, I mean heavily sliding scale. No one is going to be turned away. But the 15-minute discovery call is free, no charge whatsoever. And what we do in the discovery call is I'll ask questions, you ask questions, and we see if retrocession may be a good fit for you. For somebody who wants to proceed with retrocession after that 15-minute discovery call, we will schedule a first meeting. Now, this can be in person or on Zoom. If somebody's in the local area, I do prefer to do it in person. There are some things that I can't do as well on a video as I can do in person. And it is possible to do retrocession over the phone without video, but I discourage it. It's very valuable for me to be able to see your face while we're doing this. I'm watching for very particular things, little signs that of what's happening, and not being able to see it. I can do it. I have done it. But it's just that much more effective if there's video, and it's even more effective in person because some of the subtle detail is not available in video. And so that first meeting, we do not do retrocession. The first meeting, we talk, we kind of figure out what your goals are for retrocession. We do some relaxation. And that's really essential because I have to see how challenging it is for you to go where you need to go. And if you can't get there easily, that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We're just going to have to do some other work, or you're really going to have to do some other work to get to the point where retrocession is going to be highly effective for you. Yeah, I can do it with somebody who isn't able to relax, but it's usually not going to be as effective. And like I said, I'm not here to take your money. I don't want you to, pay money or, even more importantly, waste your time doing retrocession if it's only going to be partially effective because you have some work to do on learning to relax or memory work. So we're going to assess at that first meeting other work that you may need to do. And once you're ready, we're going to schedule the first working session. Now, I did skip something. Before that first meeting, there's paperwork to fill out. I need to get a history from you, and it's not long and involved. It might take you a half hour at the most to fill out. So after the paperwork, the 15-minute call, the paperwork, the first meeting, and then the first working session happens. The first working session is where we're actually going to do retrocession. And the book goes into this. Please read there if you want more details. But basically, we come up with a plan of action at that session, that first working session. And that is going to be based not just on what you tell me in your normal everyday waking consciousness. We're going to go into deep relaxation. And in that deeply relaxed state, you're going to explore. Now, I'm not going to go into it here. I am putting together some videos where I'll go deeper into this. And I do this in the in-person workshops. But this is not a process of thinking your way back to the event that we need to work on. That's actually the opposite of what you want to do in retrocession. We look out for additional YouTube videos. I don't think I'll do it in the podcast, but YouTube videos. I'm working on a course right now, basic retrocession course, where you'll actually do retrocession. It's via YouTube, so you don't have me guiding you directly, but you can do some work and you can actually get some healing from doing it by video, but it's just not as effective. And it tends to be more symptom relief than actual healing, but it is possible to get it. I mean, I did all of this on myself. So obviously it's possible to do it without someone guiding you through it directly. But there's a particular way of going back to these memories that I think is essential, because our conscious mind is not going to take us where we need to go. I'm telling you, the conscious mind is going to take us to tangential little stuff. And that's part of the reason why YouTube retrocession is not going to work as well as one-on-one live retrocession, because our minds want us to stay away from the big, hard stuff. Our minds want us to go after the little stuff. Our minds don't want to go to that difficult stuff. So that's why one-to-one is so effective. But you can get something out of the YouTube sessions. But we'll work on that at that first working session. We're going to go back, find the stuff we need to work on, and then we're going to work on it. We're going to do the actual retrocession. So we locate it, and then we clear it up with sweeping integration. At the close of the first working session, as we always do, we're going to talk. We're going to debrief, and we are going to get you scheduled. So the way I work now, we are going to schedule in advance at least a month, if not 2 months. This is important. Sometimes, often what happens with retrocession, well, in the past, we weren't really setting goals for retrocession. It was basically, I just want to feel better. And what often happens is somebody gets 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, and the big stuff we've kind of handled, and then they kind of just forget about. They're kind of not forget about, but it just doesn't seem so pressing anymore. And that's okay. If your goal is just to get rid of the big stuff and live a good life, we can do 2 or 3 sessions. But I think a lot of people want that deep, deep healing. They want to get to that place where they're not reactive anymore. They want to get to that place where they're not getting triggered anymore. And so it's important to decide where you're trying to go and then set up a schedule for retrocession that's going to get you where you want to go, because it's just not 2 or 3 sessions is not going to get most people where they actually want to go. But you do a couple of those sessions, and if we don't have a plan in place, lots of other shiny things are going to come up. And you're feeling good, so why not, right? And certainly, like I said, you can come for 2 or 3 sessions, but I want to learn where you actually want to go, what you want for your life. Because, as an example, if you're in a dead-end job, you hate the job, suffering from depression and anxiety, we can clear up the anxiety. Let's just say we clear up the anxiety. I'm not saying we can do this for you. I'm not saying I can cure you of anxiety. But if somebody does come to a couple sessions and the anxiety, most of the anxiety is kind of subsided, not having panic attacks anymore, that doesn't mean they're going to leave the dead-end job. It doesn't mean that they're going to go where they want to go. They're just going to suffer less at the dead-end job. But if they tell me early in the process, if they tell me at the first meeting and the first working session that they want to get out of their dead-end job, we're going to probably need more than a couple of sessions, because it's not just the depression, the anxiety, the suffering that's keeping them in the job. It's going to be some other stuff as well. And so that's even kind of a surface level desire. But if somebody really wants the deep stuff, if they want to get rid of all the triggering that's happening to them, if they want to suffer as little as a human can suffer, it's just going to take more sessions. So we start with the end in mind, and then we set up a schedule for that. We get it all scheduled in advance. You'll get text messages, email reminders, a call, whatever you want. We'll get that set in advance as well to remind you of the appointments. And then we start working through the process. But as we go through the process, what's really important to me is that retrocession is working. Now, if it makes you feel better and you roller coaster and that's what you want, that's fine. But that is not what I'm here for. I'm willing to do it, but I want people to get real healing. And so on a regular basis, we will have a little bit of an addition to one of the meetings where we assess how retrocession is working for you. Are we meeting the goals that you set out? Are we headed in the direction of those goals? I think a lot of spiritual healing, especially spiritual coaches, will really try to sell people on how well it's working for them. This is the opposite of that. I want to debug and find out whether it's really working, not just that you feel kind of better. I want to know that it's working in the way that you planned when you signed up for retrocession in the first place. So we do these periodic assessments. It is not an assessment of you. It is an assessment of me. It's an assessment of the process. because I don't want you to waste your time and money doing something that's not effective for you when maybe something else will be just as or more effective than retrocession. And so we do those periodic evaluations. Goals can change, and that is fine. Goals may change. I know for me, my goals were very different when I was suffering from anxiety and depression. Once the anxiety and depression was gone, everything changed because now things that seemed impossible were possible. And so if I were coming to myself for retrocession, things would have changed radically from the beginning into, 3, 4, 5, 6 months into it. So always doing that reevaluation. So that's kind of the general outline of how the process goes in individual sessions, and then how the flow of sessions goes. So you have 15-minute discovery call, paperwork, first meeting, first working session, and then regular sessions. Oh, I didn't mention how long they are. The ebook does talk about this. The first working session is 3 hours. It's long. Believe me, it's worth it. Then periodic sessions after that, those are at most an hour. So they're not always going to be 3 hours. And I do have availability on weekends, evenings. So we'll find the time. So it's a bigger time commitment up front with the paperwork, with doing the work you need to do to get ready for retrocession with that first working session. But once you get through that first working session, everybody or most everybody that has gone through that comes back for a second session. The second session is much easier. Usually it's much quicker. They don't need as much time to relax. They don't need as much time to sweep. It's just a more efficient process. That may not always be the case, but most of the time that is the case. And so I hear my neighbors starting up band practice, and I think it's probably going to start coming through the microphone. And I'm really at the end of it now. We're getting close to an hour. I think I've gone into enough detail. Please check out the website. If you're interested, intrigued, or just curious, the website has some information. You can download the ebook. We could schedule a discovery call. Obviously, this podcast, I talk about retrocession. It's always tangentially related to healing. So most episodes, I'm going to talk about retrocession. Some of the podcast episodes are deep relaxation. They can be great to go to sleep to. I might be starting up a second podcast and move the deep relaxation stuff, the meditations, the journeys. I'm going to move those to a different podcast, I think. And this is going to be more the talking podcast. I also have a YouTube channel. I'm working on a lot of videos because I want to give some resources. So we're going to do memory work on YouTube. We're going to practice doing the memory work. We're going to practice the relaxation. So all the component pieces of retrocession, the goal is that there are YouTube videos for each piece of retrocession that can help people prepare for their first session, or maybe they never do retrocession. But all of these videos are going to provide something valuable to you. Even memory work. Memory work is amazing. Maybe I'll do that as my next podcast. Memory work is not just about the hard work. Memory work can really feel good. So it's even a technique for symptom relief. If you're feeling bad, doing this memory work can elevate your mood, give you that temporary relief you need to get up and go about your day. And so that may be the next thing I do. I'm also producing some memory work videos on YouTube, like I said, so look out for those. Follow me on social media. You can always reach at chris@retrocession.org, not .com, retrocession.org, Chris, C-H-R-A-S, at retrocession, retrocession.org, or just DM me on social media. I will respond pretty quickly. So I look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to ask questions. You don't need to even be interested in coming in for retrocession. Let's talk. As always, this is Chris from retrocession.org. This has been Step into Bliss, episode 15. Thanks for listening.